So this here is the CZ75 SP01 Tactical. It is a full-size hammer-fired pistol made by CZ. In my opinion, this is one of the best pistols that you can buy for under $1,000. Now, more specifically, under say $750, $800, which I think that this is a fantastic pistol for the price. But for what you pay, you get a lot out of this pistol. So first, let's talk here about the trigger. You have a double single action pistol. So first, this here is the double action pull, good amount of pre-travel, heavier break here, bit of a longer pull. And now we're going to move into the reset and the single action trigger here. So this here is the reset. I find it to be a little bit long, and it's a very smooth but light trigger. And now here is the single action, and we'll show it again. So here's, if you were to just be using it in single action, good amount of pre-travel to here, and then a very nice light break, and then it's a decent reset. The trigger on these things is pretty good from the factory. I'm not the biggest fan in the world. They're definitely not my favorite trigger I've ever felt, but you do have options when it comes to upgrading them. As a lot of people who are into CZs will know, the brand Cajun Gunworks does full trigger overhauls, really full gun overhauls on pretty much every CZ platform out there. Next up, I want to talk about the ergonomics of this pistol here. So this pistol has fantastic ergonomics when it comes down to the curvature in the back strap here, the grip textures. Now, you'll notice I am not using the factory rubber palm swells. I'm using flat lock grips. That's just because my personal preference. I'm not a big fan of the palm swell grips, but I do really like the ergonomics of this pistol. When it comes down in this back strap here and in this beaver tail up here, you end up getting a really nice and comfortable grip up here on the firearm. And then you have some nice, memory points here, such as your little slide lock and your decocker to kind of put your hands up nice there. And one nice thing with the CZ pistols is you have a very low bore axis here. So you don't have a ton of reciprocating mass in their slides, because they cut their slides very short and tuck them into the frame here. As you can see, the frame looks a little bit bigger than, say, most pistols that you're used to, which in my opinion is a great thing because it really helps reduce the recoil. With that being said, that brings us into our next point here, which is recoil. This gun is incredibly flat shooting for, just out of the box OEM spec CZ75, right? These things are very flat shooting, one of the flattest shooting full-size guns that I own. I think that's mostly in part due to the grip angles and the low slide, which gives you less reciprocating mass, equaling less recoil. Now, some of the features here, the decocker is, fine to get to. It's not really hard to access. Very right there with your thumb, easy to hit while you're in a full grip with this pistol. Now, for me, I'm not personally the biggest fan of double single action. I got this specific CZ because I wanted to try out double single action. I think I picked this one up for about $750, which, yes, is a little steep, but in today's pistols, the better and more name brand pistols, you're going to be getting into that 600 plus range nowadays, where I think this is a really good option. You get a 19+1 capacity in this thing here. You get two 19-round magazines out of the box. Some of the pros that I have with this pistol here are that it's very flat shooting. It's very comfortable in your hands. And, there's a lot of options when it comes to upgrading them aftermarket to make them incredibly shooting pistols. They're pretty good from the factory, but they definitely have room for improvement. Some more pros that you have up here, you have a nice full rail where you can fit a lot of accessories, tons of different light mounting options. Has a good trigger guard here with nice serrations up on the front. Not that most people are really gripping it up like this and using it like that, but it is something that you have if that is for you. You have nice front and rear slide serrations here, which are useful if you're a press checker or something like that. But again, one thing that you do run into with this smaller or shorter slide top here is the fact that it can be a little bit difficult to get used to if you're coming from especially striker fired guns or something like that, where you have a bigger slide up top. You're used to kind of just throwing your hands on it and you're fine. This is a little bit different to grip, which just something to note. Not necessarily a con, just something to note with the fact that you have this lower slide here. You know, you're not able to get as much on the slide itself to manipulate the slide. So moving into some cons here. Some cons that I do have with this pistol. I think from the factory, the trigger is decent. It is a good factory trigger, but it is not necessarily a great trigger. It's very smooth, very comfortable to pull, but in some aspects when you're shooting it, it's a little longer on the reset side than I like, so it's a little bit slower for me to shoot. I don't get insanely fast splits with it, which, you know, part of that's training, part of that's the trigger. You can obviously upgrade the crap out of these things. That being said, I think, you know, it's a decent trigger. It's not fantastic, it's not terrible, but it's a decent trigger. You're not going to be super upset with it, but you definitely can get better triggers on the market. One thing I am not personally a fan of was the palm swell grips. That's just how they fit in my hand. They may fit in your hand very nice. The rubber grips over these, you know, lock grips could be nice if you're trying to carry this pistol, which I will say the weight of this pistol will kind of prevent you from wanting to concealed carry it. You'd be better with the SP01 or plenty of other smaller or even polymer framed options out there. Another con, which isn't super con, is the smaller slide for manipulation purposes. Now, for recoil purposes, the lower slide is fantastic. The way that it tucks in really helps to keep this a flat shooting pistol. But when it comes to manipulating, press checking, racking, it can be a little bit difficult to, you know, manipulate the slide. Now, another one of the cons that I have here comes in with the iron sights. They are okay from the factory. They're not the worst iron sights. You do get night sights, which is a nice feature, but I will say I am not a big fan of these sights. They're sometimes a little bit awkward for your eye to pick up due to the fact that they are pretty low sitting iron sights, and without the option for an optics cut, that kind of leaves you a little disappointed. Now, you can go out and have it cut aftermarket. There's plenty of companies out there that will cut these pistols for you, but just something to note, I'm not a huge fan of the iron sights. Another thing that I am not a huge fan of is this guide rod right here. As you can see, you can move it a ton. It's a plastic guide rod. Now, is that necessarily a weak point? No, not necessarily. However, it just is something to me that I would have preferred a metal guide rod. You can go and get them aftermarket. Plenty of companies make them. So that being said, not a huge deal, but just something to be aware of when you're considering this firearm. Now here you can see they actually do have a very nice extended mag release here. Very easy to get to. You know, I have relatively shorter thumbs for being such big hands, but I have no problem reaching over and getting that mag release. Now, what roles does this pistol fit? I'm not quite sure for that. I know a lot of people make these into competition guns, which I think that it would be a great competition gun once you did all the upgrading to it. Now with the Shadow 2s, maybe not so much, because, you know, you're going to go put $300 to $500 into this pistol, and then boom, you're at the Shadow 2 price point, which then you have an OEM with warranted pistol that, you know, has an optics cut from the factory for around $1,200 versus sending this thing out, spending the additional $500 to bring it to a point that the OEM Shadow 2 is at. That being said, you know, good home defense gun. I wouldn't really consider this a good concealed carry gun. It, in some aspects, is, given the fact that it is the double single action trigger, making it a little bit safer for, you know, concealed carry, as it's a lot longer and heavier of a pull. I think it's about a 7 or an 8 pound pull in double action, and then in single action, I believe it's between 3 and 3.5 pounds, which the single action trigger feels fantastic, but the double action isn't really my thing. Now, you know, a lot of people will have different uses for these, and they are a really fun, just plinker at the range, competition gun, you name it, whatever you're looking for. They are a lot of fun to shoot. Would I recommend the SP01 Tactical? Absolutely. It's a great looking firearm. It's very nice shooting, very flat. It shoots, you know, pretty much on par with all of my other full-size pistols. I will say it's a little bit better in recoil due to the lower slide and the comfortable grip with the nice beaver tail here, really helping you get that correct grip on the pistol every time. Now, one thing to note, once you do get into that $750 point for a pistol, you have a ton of options. So this very well might not be the best option for you, but it is a great option for anybody who likes CZ pistols. And if you don't know much about CZ pistols yet, I highly recommend that you check them out. A lot of people do love them, and you know, the more you play with them, the more you will like them. I think from the factory, you get a great package that has plenty of aftermarket support to make it a fantastic package.